Hi everybody, Matthew Lasar here, and I wanted to thank those of you who watched my 5-part series on why third parties always fail here in the United States of America. But some of you had a really good question, which was, hey, doesn't the Republican Party in the 1850s count as a successful third party? I mean, after all, the Republican Party just sort of came out of nowhere in 1854, and by 1860, it had catapulted itself to the White House. Doesn't that count as a third-party success?
Well, here's my answer. The Republican Party never got a chance to become a third party. It rose upon the ashes of one of the two major parties of the pre-Civil War era and was America's second party within 18 months of its founding. Here's a quick and dirty version of that story. Through the 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s, the Democratic and Whig parties dominated USA politics. The Democrats, founded by war hero Andrew Jackson and his Vice President Martin Van Buren, stood for small government, and they perfected the art of mass politics with huge rallies and partisan newspapers, and they were popular with farmers and striving entrepreneurs. In response, Americans who favored a more hands-on approach to government launched the Whig Party. The Whigs favored tariffs, central banking, and federal support for internal improvements. Bridges, canals, turnpikes, that sort of thing. And they too supercharged their message with candidates like war hero William Henry Harrison, who his supporters claimed would humbly prefer life in a log cabin to politics, and who the voters elected to the White House in 1840, and who, unfortunately, died of pneumonia about a month after his inaugural. Both parties sent presidents to the White House, but both parties also faced a problem: slavery. By the 1840s, there were 2.5 million slaves in the USA, and Southern slaveholders wanted even more, while millions of Northerners regarded slavery as a moral abomination, which it was. The leaders of the Whigs and Democrats in the 1840s and 1850s, Martin Van Buren, Daniel Webster, and Henry Clay, regarded the slavery issue as a constant threat to the stability of the Union. Masters of the art of compromise, they took it upon themselves to try to keep slavery out of national politics. But as millions of Americans migrated across the continent, the question kept popping up: would slavery be allowed northwest of the Mississippi River? The issue came to a head many times, but really began to boil over when in 1854 a Democratic senator named Stephen Douglas proposed that migrants to the Kansas and Nebraska territories be allowed to decide for themselves whether their soon-to-be states would be slave or free. Popular sovereignty, this was called. This triggered a virtual civil war in Kansas, further polarizing the country and dividing both the Democrats and the Whigs. Meanwhile, that same year, in Ripon, Wisconsin, a small group of anti-slavery activists came up with a new, simple, and appealing platform. Slavery should be banned in the territories. They would call themselves the Republican Party. As the Democratic Party split in two over the slavery issue, mostly Northerners versus Southerners, Whigs everywhere could not figure out their response to this idea, and their party quickly began to collapse. In November of that year, even though the Republican Party still wasn't fully formed, some of its supporters won over a dozen seats in midterm congressional elections. By the 1856 presidential race, the Republican candidate, John Fremont, won 114 electoral college votes, while the Whig Party candidate only won 8. By 1858, the Whig Party had all but disappeared from Congress. The Republicans now controlled close to 40% of the House of Representatives. They were the second party of a new party system, Republicans versus Democrats, that would give them the White House in 1860 and a civil war a year later.
Bottom line, the reason why the Republican Party prevailed so quickly in the 1850s is that one of the two major political parties of the period basically fell apart over the slavery issue. The Republican Party didn't have a chance to become a third party. It went from 0 to 100% faster than it or anyone else could have possibly imagined.